Our final speaker of the day, Andrew Lee, a clinical nurse leader. He is trauma coordinator at DCH Regional Medical Center in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He's been a flight nurse for 4 years and is actively involved with disaster planning at the local and state level. Andrew is also involved with the state trauma system as a member of the West Alabama Regional Task Force, and he's a founding member of the first chapter for Men in Nursing in the South and a member of the Emergency Nurses Association. We had a chance to speak a little bit earlier, and Andrew will have a very interesting story to tell. Andrew?
Well, thank you for inviting me here. We've had some great speakers today, and I'm going to share a little bit about the tornado that happened to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, April 27th, 2011, so a little over a year ago. This is our hospital. It is close to a 600-bed hospital. We see about 80,000 patients through our ER a year. What is unique about our hospital and our situation, we are the only trauma center that serves about 16 counties in West Alabama. So we are the only place to take care of those critically injured patients. So how did we get from here to here 1 year later? And we're going to talk. This presentation is not to tell somebody, to tell you how to do your disaster plan. You should do this or you should do that. I'm going to tell you what we learned and how we learned it the hard way, and hopefully you'll take away a few things that can help you. Our objectives. So where is Tuscaloosa? Well, this is Alabama, and that red dot is Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We are a fairly large community, around 190,000 people inside the city, have a little more out through the counties. We are the home of some pretty big industry there, including the University of Alabama, and Mercedes is actually there, and I couldn't do this presentation without mentioning also the home of 14-time national champions in football. So, how did we, that day, what we consider probably the worst day in our history, how did we actually become what we've tagged the town of champions? And that's what I'm going to talk about just a little bit today. This is a picture of Alabama. It kind of shows the path of the tornadoes. What a lot of people don't realize, this day, we actually had close to 60-something tornadoes that came across the state of Alabama. 15 of those were either EF4s or EF5s. 15. From the 25th of April through the 28th of April, there were 208 tornadoes that came across the south. So we're talking about a period of time, about a week long, where we've just been devastated by these storms. This is a radar image that's about 8 hours. All the blobs that you see are either an EF4 or an EF5 that came across the south in some area. You can see right over here is Tuscaloosa, and this is our storm that was actually down here. So 38 of our counties were declared complete disaster areas. Let me set up the timetable for you, what happened to us on this day. And you're going to notice as I get on into the presentation, Joplin and Tuscaloosa experienced a lot of the exact same things. We saw a lot of the exact same things in the beginning and in the end of our disaster. So some of this you're gonna hear, but there's something that sort of set this day apart for our state. We knew a week in advance that we had the potential for bad weather. 1 week. The National Weather Service has started putting out their warnings and saying, there's a potential for bad weather. 4 days out, the National Weather Service put out a warning that no one had ever seen before. Every scale that they had was pegged out at 10. The chance for bad weather, it's here, it's going to be here, be prepared. Well, 2 days out, those scales were still that high, and everybody was talking, look, something's not right about this day. We had warm, moist Gulf air coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and we had a cold front coming from the west, and it always meets right there at the Alabama-Mississippi line and causes these tornadoes. April the 15th, a few days before, we had an EF3 go through the bottom part of our county. So we'd already had a chance to kind of, be ready for any type of disaster, but it had taxed a lot of our systems already because we had a lot of damage and debris from that. The tornado was on the ground about 18 miles, a little over 500 yards wide, so it left a pretty good path of destruction. It's not our first rodeo with tornadoes. We're sort of accustomed. But that morning, 5:30, we had a tornado come through Tuscaloosa, an EF3, and destroy a little community about 15 miles from our hospital. I get the phone call in the morning, hey, we need you at the hospital, something's happened. So I'm heading to the hospital thinking two things. Number one, I'm not a morning person. Number two, I know that I have to be there at 7 o'clock because when stuff, is going to go wrong, it's going to really go wrong. That day, or April 28th at midnight, we had a new physician ER group starting in our hospital. So we knew none of this group that was coming in. And so we were meeting them for breakfast to kind of get ready. And they get here and, wow, y'all have had a lot go on today. Breakfast was delayed. 9 o'clock, we're finally sitting down to eat, and we're talking. But that proved to be something that saved our tails that day. We put our incident command center up in the hospital that morning, and we left it up all day long. We watched the weather, and we knew from being in Alabama, you get these thunderstorms. And if the sun comes out in the morning, you're going to have thunderstorms in the afternoon. And we watched these massive storms build, and then we watched tornadoes start crisscrossing the state. We watched our neighbor to the north, Coleman, Alabama, have a huge tornado come right through the center of their town. Their hospital takes a glancing blow. They have some damage, and we're watching this all on TV. Wow, this is, I'm glad we're not, in Coleman. We watch this all throughout the day. What makes our situation unique, like I said, we're the only hospital, but this same scenario is playing out all over the state of Alabama. So having resources brought in is not an option. So we're still watching all this. We don't know what is to come yet. This is a warning that was put out about 1:45, and this is basically covered most of Alabama saying, hey, the weather's going to get bad. Our tornado is this little bitty tiny dot that's way over here in the corner. You can't even see it hardly. And it just popped up, started heading our way. I'm going to show you a lot of video. We actually obtained all the video from our security cameras. So this is inside our waiting room. In Alabama, we have a extensive, warning system just like Missouri does, and the sirens went off and all that. But what is amazing, what these people are watching is a tornado on TV live on tower cams. And I know that a lot of people watch this happen live on the national news. We're watching the tornado, and that's actually our nurse manager and our director there. And they're watching this tornado, and you get fixed on this storm. Look at this thing coming, wow, this is going to be bad. What you don't realize is in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen that they're looking at is our hospital in the foreground. Hence the hands on the back of the head. So we watched this. This tornado was on the ground 45 minutes before it got to us. We watched it for 45 minutes on live TV heading towards us. We had a 24-minute warning time on all of our sirens that went off, and that's part of the reason, that we have that whole cry wolf thing. We've seen tornadoes like this before. In Alabama, we watched them. This is what we see from the top of our hospital, from our security camera, is this tornado heading for us. Now, you notice I'm not in any of the pictures. One of my hobbies is I love weather and I love taking pictures, and I was on the 4th floor of that parking deck that you can see at the bottom of the screen taking pictures of this storm heading towards us. And you ever stare at a candle and you sort of just get mesmerized? That's what happened. You're staring at this thing, you can feel your ears popping, you know it's coming towards you, but I'm watching through the shutter of a camera, and apparently you're protected, because you see the guys in the hurricanes out there, the wind, the weather's beating them to death, and I felt the same way. And then there was a power flash, and I pulled the camera down, and I realized it is right here. So took off running. I called my wife, who we talk about taking care of your family first. They were suffering at the beach. So they were way away from where I was, but she's watching this. She said, "Oh, I'm watching. It's on the national news." And I'm running down the hallway next to my office and look over my shoulder, and this is what I can see coming towards us. And I told her, I said, "Look," I said, "it's outside the window." I said, "I'll call you as soon as I can." It looks like, and the power goes. So, of course, the last thing she hears me saying is, I'll basically call you when I can, but this thing is encroaching on our facility very quick, heading right for us. I laid down in the floor because I knew that was the only place I could go, and the power went out, came back on immediately. Took about 3 seconds for it to kick back on. But while I was laying there, as the power had gone out, this tornado was in the neighborhood directly behind the hospital. It missed us by half a block. It came right for us. It made a right-hand turn away from the hospital, past the hospital, and made a direct left-hand turn back on its original path. If you'll look in the background, you'll see the tornado right outside of our ambulance bay there. And then the next picture you'll see is one of our main streets that goes through Tuscaloosa. And remember the Krispy Kreme donut shop? It was right there where that tornado just hit. Silence. Just like that after the storm went by. I got up, ran through the middle of the hospital, down the steps, out the front door of the ER, and the wind's blowing, but it's sunny outside. So I come back through, and we think we've been spared. I look out our ER door, and to the north is where I'm facing. The tornado passed to the south of us. We thought we had been spared, and we had not. We had no clue. This is the pictures that I took and just some radar images, and if you'll see in that bottom picture where it says possible debris ball, that is a debris ball. We had so much stuff picked up in the air that it actually reflects off of the radar. So that stuff that you see, that hook that's there, is all the junk that it picked up that it's taking. This tornado was on the ground over 80 miles. It was 1.5 miles wide at its widest point when it went through Tuscaloosa. Like Joplin, it went through 6 miles of the city, but it came through very, very quickly. The top wind speed that was recorded, 199. Now, what makes it an F5 is 200. So we're right at that limit. 1 mile an hour doesn't make a lot of difference. It does a lot of destruction, This is the path that it took through our town. If you see the green spot where it says UA, right where those two roads meet, that is where our hospital actually sits. This is the 30,000-foot view, and you can see the dirt path that goes straight through the center of the county, straight through the main part of our town. So we're ready. Okay, what's one of the first things you need during a disaster? Is the EMA, because they're going to help you mobilize everything. Well, they were located right there with the very first building that was hit. They were on the bottom floor. The building caved in on them. It took them 2.5 hours to dig themselves out. The tornado then crossed the street and took out our 911 tower, our fire tower, and all that. So we could not talk across the county to each other. The next thing it did was cross the street and hit the Salvation Army. Now, they're important after the fact, for your shelters. So we didn't have any of those. It also took out the building that housed all of our garbage trucks, dump trucks, backup police vehicles, and everything that you need. The Midtown and the mall that I'm pointing out there, those are two very highly populated areas. This was on a weekday. It was highly populated, and it missed that by a half block on the other side. Then it went up the road and got our American Red Cross, which is usually somebody you need during a disaster also, and our hospital sits right there. So now we're going to go through a disaster without those people that you need. I was mad. We were on the phone on our little Southern links trying to get back and forth to talk to the EMA, and you're furious because they will not answer the phone. We didn't know that they were having to dig themselves out. Luckily, nobody from our EMA was hurt, but you need those people. So, in 6 minutes, we lost 12.6% of the city 7,000 were left unemployed, 600 businesses lost, 2,500 homes destroyed, and 1,257 destroyed, 2,500 homes damaged. That was in the middle of the city. There were over 5,000 homes that were damaged and over 3,000 that were completely destroyed countywide. Now, trees, there were 6,000 that were destroyed. We removed 2,983 stumps, and there were 231,000 acres of forestry land destroyed. Now, why do I tell you all this? Well, EMS is a vital part of what you need during a disaster. And for EMS to be effective, they have to be able to get to the people and get out. Well, all of this debris was now scattered on our roads. This is our football stadium, holds 103,000 people. It is less than a mile from the hospital. When Alabama plays football, our town at least doubles in size. Well, this stadium, with all the debris that we had, could be filled 5 times. That's 10 million cubic yards of debris, and a cubic yard is about the size of a dishwasher, of a washing machine. So that's what EMS was having to go through to get back to us. EMS only made 200 ambulance runs that night, only 200. And you ask, well, why? Well, we're going to talk about it. We didn't get a phone call for a long time. Then we get the first phone call of those patients that are coming to us, and a simple 5-minute ride turned into a 20-minute ride. But this is the phone call that we heard.
Hi, this is Dr. Crawford.
Hey, Dr. Crawford, this is Walkley on 27th. Short notice, I got 3 infants, CPR in progress. 27 is bringing them to you right now.
3 infants?
3 infants, sir. We're doing the best we can. 15 months.
All right.
3. 1, 2, 3.
All of them in cardiac arrest?
Yes, sir. That's one of them.
Come on. What else y'all got?
I don't know.
That's fine. Come on.
This is just us.
All right.
We're not a pediatric trauma center, okay? The first call we get is 3 infants in full cardiac arrest. That was the first call we got. That was the only time the phone really rang. We took it off the hook because it was too much, and the only phone calls that we're getting through were those people on the outskirts that had landlines telling us that they could not get across the path of where the tornado went. The tornado blocked off the path to our hospital. Behind us, there are 3 bridges that go across into another city. So everybody that was having to come had to come from the same direction. So we were completely cut off. If you look down the hallway there in that picture, the ER is already getting full. We are a 52-bed ER. We're fairly large, and we had people scattered everywhere. But those people you saw come in, those were our 3 infants that were in full cardiac arrest. There was 1 paramedic in the back of a truck with 1 monitor and 1 ambu bag. When we open the doors to that, he is doing chest compressions as he can and bagging as he can. A set of monitor pads on each one of those kids, swapping between, okay? Now, you do what you have to do with what you got, and that guy did a tremendous job. But think about the mental health impact on that. But they were the first call. It took them almost 40 minutes to get to the hospital because of the debris they had to go through. We had all the people come from directly behind the hospital almost immediately. Trucks and chainsaws. In Alabama, we got them and we know how to use them. And that's what we did. We talked about the people. You've heard the people. The people, they are what made the difference on this day. You see the Good Samaritans driving up in their trucks. Now, you look and say, well, it doesn't look that bad. I can only show you so much of the video because of all the patients' faces that we have. This was just one of the examples. But there is one vehicle that we see 7 times. It's a pickup truck that we don't know exactly how many people he brought to the hospital, but we see him 7 times on video just bringing truckloads of people in to take care of them. So your Good Samaritans are actually the ones that are going to bring your people to the hospital, right? Because your hospital is going to be there, correct? You hope. Fortunately, we were there, but we got overwhelmed very, very quickly. How many patients? Now, we get this question asked a lot. And when we listened to the Joplin presentation, you had the hospital that was destroyed and the hospital that was left standing. We were the only hospital. Now, fortunately, we had a good disaster plan, too. We had 450 pre-made packages that already have armbands and all that good stuff in it that can be slapped on the patient as an unknown, and we can scan them if our computer system's up, and everything is fine. 3 hours into it, we were out of those 450 packages, and I started thinking, man, that's a lot. You then had to go to making up names on the fly, and then you had to go to the whole EMS tagging system inside the facility, which your ER nurses may be familiar with, but nurses that come down from the floor to help will not be. So that made up a whole different thing. If you try to spell unknown Amsterdam during a disaster, it normally doesn't come out right, and you're not going to be able to find that patient in a computer system if your computer systems are up, which ours, some were, some weren't. Everything went to paper, and that's what we stuck with. This is just a picture down our main trauma hall of patients that we had. You can kind of see it's a little chaotic trying to move through there. But we treated over 900 patients in just under 12 hours through our facility. Now, our disaster happened and was over with for the hospital. Those 900 patients around about came in and were taken care of in that 12 hours. The days after, we did take care of a few other patients, but the majority of our injuries happened up front. Now, 900 showed up. There were probably another 1,000 to 1,500 that were actually treated in the field by some of the EMS that had their stations set up that they could take care of them out there. By 8:30, we were at capacity. I told you 52-bed ER. How many people will your ER hold? That's the question. It'll hold more than 52 because when you line stretchers up, put them in chairs, wherever you can, that's what we had to do. We opened 6 alternate care sites in our hospital. The cath lab, same-day surgery, endoscopy, one of our big conference rooms, the cafeteria. You'd be surprised where you can treat patients. But we were full. Our nearest level 1, level 2 trauma, or our level 1 trauma center from us is in Birmingham, which is about an hour away, and Children's Hospital, where we needed to send all those pediatric patients, was about an hour away. The problem was, remember I told you about all the tornadoes that were crisscrossing? Well, when it leaves Tuscaloosa, it heads for Birmingham, and they were dealing with what we had. That tornado went about 8 miles north of Birmingham. So when you talk about 96 hours sustainability, can you handle it in your facility? I believe this is what they had in mind. Nobody can get to you, and you're going to have a massive influx of patients coming in. 96 hours with the patients we have in our hospital right now, sure, we have enough. But when you have another 1,000 that come in on top of that, can you take care of them? And that's what we were facing. Nobody could get to us from the outside. It took a long time for that to happen. So, experience, the most brutal of teachers, but you learn. My God, you learn. So what did we learn from this? A lot. And our very first thing was triaging and tracking those patients. So you slapped a little armband on them if they had one. They come in and they're unknown or they're disaster number 151. Great. You put them in a hallway and they're acting a little goofy and you decide this person really needs a CAT scan. So you take them around, you have a CAT scan, you bring him back, and there's nowhere to put him in the hallway where you had him, so you have to shove him over on another part of the ER. Then the radiologist calls and says, Disaster 151's got a massive bleed. He's got to go to the OR now. So now you have to find him. Where did you put him? Because there's 200, 300 people in your ER, patients, plus your employees and staff, plus everybody looking for those loved ones or those family and friends. Because, you know, when the power goes off in your facility, there's one thing that's normally not on generator power. Does anybody know what that is? The air conditioner. Now, in Alabama, we use an air conditioner, okay? A lot. That day, the temperature hit 84 degrees outside. The humidity was about 80%. So when you walk outside, you kind of hit that wall of heat that you feel. They don't put them on air conditioners. Or the air conditioners on generators. With the door shut, it gets hot very, very quickly. If you try to work in a hot environment with people who are your friends and your coworkers in a disaster, how long do you think it takes for tempers to flare? Not very long. The other problem that brings in is you can't control your doorways, those people coming in and out, so security becomes a huge issue. This is our ambulance entrance, and we're trying to tag people as they come in. The guy in the yellow shirt and the lady in the green shirt and the lady in the pink shirt are trying to do that with those patients that we don't already have assigned. So getting those people tagged, knowing what's going on with them a little bit, and then following them through the system was our biggest downfall. So what we did is, I'm going to skip this slide because I'm going to talk to you about this. We divided our ER up into pod systems and assigned somebody to be in charge of that. Now, we've all seen those Hicks models, and you label out everything. It's this big, long, huge thing that you can never figure out during a disaster. We made ours very simple. Your ER director and your head physician aren't involved in patient care. They get the 30,000 view of what's going on. Your 4 big colored boxes become your coordinators. They are responsible for knowing what is going on their hallway. The small ones underneath become your team members. So if I'm working on a team and I have a patient that I need to send to the floor, I relay that message to my pod coordinator, and my pod coordinator talks to my transfer triage coordinator while we all go back to doing our jobs and just make a sort of a chain of command. Now, what is unique about this for us is we put this into our daily practice of our ER. So this is not new to our staff when a disaster happens. Every day, those pod coordinators take care of patients. They're just a nurse that is assigned that day as a pod coordinator. They have a couple of patients that they take care of, and if a disaster were to hit, automatically they get pulled from patient care and assume that role. As management comes in, they fill in those spots. So our staff is used to working in that now. When you have a 52-bed ER and you try to manage the whole thing, that's very difficult. So we had to size it down a little bit. So that's what we ended up doing. Can you hear me now? No. Communication with police, fire, and EMS was very difficult. Remember, it took out our 911 tower. We couldn't talk across the county. The biggest thing I guess we heard, we were listening to some of the 911 tapes, and there is a, depending on where you were, you could pick up bits and pieces of communication. And this one police officer's transmission got through, and he said, I need an ambulance, and he gave the address. He said, I'm in Alberta City, and I need an ambulance. And the dispatcher said, well, what is your address? What is your location? He said, I don't know. I don't know what the address is. And she came back and said, well, I have to have your address to be able to get to you. And he said, addresses don't exist anymore. Nothing exists. I don't know where I am. Now, these are police officers that, work in this town every day. And I guarantee you, when each one of you leave here, you get in your car, you take off driving, and you, whether you know it or not, you use landmarks where you turn. I'm going to turn by the Walgreens, or I'm going to do this. Well, wipe the slate clean and try to get somewhere, and that's what the police were having to do. So they would find a main road that they knew, and they would count streets and say, I'm the 5th or I'm the 6th street up from this cross street, and that's all they had to go off of. Communication in the hospital was easy. Our phone lines stayed intact, so we could pick up the phone and call. Our issue was inside the ER, okay? So there's, 300, 350 people in here. If we all start talking at a normal voice, it becomes a mumble, and you can't tell what each conversation is. Now, throw on top of that another 150, 200 people that are in our ER looking for loved ones. Now, if you're looking for somebody that you really want to find, are you saying, excuse me, have you seen so-and-so? No. They're screaming, they're hollering, that sort of thing, plus all the normal noises of the ER. It was so loud inside. I mean, there were just times that you would literally have to have those directors literally scream out and tell everybody to be quiet and calm it down, because you couldn't hear, you couldn't function. So if I needed something, trying to find that person became an issue. So we, they hand out those nifty little vests for the incident commands and all that. Well, if you put one person in a vest in here and everybody stands together, it turns into Where's Waldo, right? Because you can't see them. So we now have colored hats that you can see, and everybody, when we talk about that, they laughed, but I can look around the room and I can find that colored hat walking down the hallway. So it works for us. And those colored hats actually correspond to those colored pods so you know which person is in charge of which. That whole grid is on a big board that's in our ER, so you know who is in charge. So that's something that we did that actually helped us a lot. This is my favorite one, okay? HIPPA. I had a reporter ask me that the day after the tornado, I had not been home yet. It was early the morning of the 28th, and she was asking me all these questions, and she said, how did you do your disaster plan? Like, did you carry it out step by step and all this? And I was tired, and I said, well, we opened the disaster book up and looked at the first page, and it told you, open the disaster plan, you're going to start here. And then I said, we tore that first page out. And she looked like I was going to say something really good, and I did. I said, we put it in the garbage can. And we held on to that first page that said, go to plan B, because that's what we had to do, and that's what we really learned that day. Is your disaster plan, it teaches you logistics. Like it's been said before, your staff, they're going to know how to take care of the patient. Your EMS, they know what to do. They're trained. That's what we do. That's what the physicians do. Let them do their job. You give them the supplies that they need and the logistical stuff to be able to manage that disaster. So what did we do for our disaster plan after the fact? We cut it way down. Way down. But HIPPA, unidentified patients, okay? There were a lot of them. So you have to use your imagination about how to disperse that information. With those unidentified patients, the biggest one were children. We had a government housing place that was hit directly. Had a lot of fatalities out of there. A lot of them were children. But when the ambulances we opened up, there were 14 kids inside, one adult. That adult claimed one of those children. All the other ones did not belong to anybody. So what do? You ask them, hey, where's your mom and dad? Well, what do? They look at you because, number one, you're a healthcare professional and they know they're going to get a shot. Number two, they look at you like, I'm not talking to you. Why? I'm a stranger. So you dealt with the kids that couldn't talk because they were injured and the ones that would not talk because you were a stranger. So what we did is a violation of every law you can imagine. We took pictures, okay? We took pictures of these kids, full body, facial shots, and then anything identifying mark that we could. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if you put that in the chart and you used it. But we had to send these kids an hour away unidentified. So we texted pictures of kids back and forth for 2 or 3 days until we had everybody matched up. Now, a digital camera with a dedicated printer that can be run off batteries or a small generator needs to be a part of your disaster plan, especially if you have a lot of unidentified patients. We figured it was better to show those parents 15 kids that did not belong to them that were all alive and well than having to take them to the morgue and show them the ones that we had. So we did have to break a little of those HIPAA rules about giving out patient information. They call your facility, is so-and-so there? Well, I can't tell you that information. Our answer that night was, I don't know, come on out. Everybody else in Tuscaloosa is here looking for somebody? Come on. We need backup. Well, what do we need backup of? Generators. They're at maximum pull. Remember that whole 96-hour thing I talked about? The issue that we had with our generators was our power went out, they came back on beautifully. Everything came back up, but we found out there were a lot of things on emergency power that you necessarily don't need on emergency power. And then we also found out your ER didn't have enough emergency power. 52 beds, how many hallways? Well, there were no red plugs up and down the hallways like we needed them. And your red plugs, were generator power. Well, if you're going to run portable monitors, if you're going to put more ultrasound machines down there, you need those. So that's one of the things that we're having to do is add more red plugs. The other thing is our hospital is in that stage of spending the big bucks ahead of time to put our ER on a generator by itself, because that's where your disaster is going to start and happen. Yes, it flowed on up into the hospital, but that's where it started. That's where we needed the most resources. If you fire up all of your MRI machines and CT machines and all that stuff during a normal day, you can sustain. But when you have double your population coming into your ER, that's where that 96 hours gets real shortened, really shortened. We had enough fuel. We actually have a refinery that's close by that we have a contract agreement with, and they actually brought us a tanker truck of diesel fuel sitting outside ready to go. We never had to use it. We had plenty, but our maintenance guys knew that we were putting a lot of strain on our facility because we kept blowing fuses everywhere. So we learned that we need our ER on a separate generator from everything else, so we're doing that. The other big thing we had was water pressure. Now, we had the water boil issue and all of that. We had 3 of our water treatment plants damaged, along with a couple of the water towers that we had. When you destroy a large area, you lose everything on top of it. So the water was rushing out everywhere, those small little pipes. And you add a lot of small pipes together, makes one large one. So from the second floor up on our hospital, which is a 7-story building, when you turned the water on, there was nothing. You couldn't flush the toilets, anything like that. That brings in a whole nother issue. Now, we had plenty of drinking water. We had, within an hour and a half of the tornado hitting, we had a 18-wheeler deliver literally a truckload of bottled water. Perfect. Got plenty of water for everybody. Without water pressure, you can't run your steam sterilizers. You take one person to the OR and do surgery, you can't clean your instruments. That makes a big problem, and that's one of the things that we faced. We do have a well that is on site, but to get pressure out of that well enough to push a steam sterilizer didn't happen. So that's something that we're having to reevaluate, is the water pressure issue. So we had water to drink. You could use some of that bottled water to wash your hands with, but you had none to help your steam sterilizers. So we transferred 17 patients as the night went on to Birmingham, once the weather had cleared towards there, to be able to have those immediate orthopedic surgeries that they needed. And like Frank said, one of those things when you have a compound femur fracture as a minor injury, you know, that's one of those things that you've got them sitting over in the corner, and normally you'd be all over that, but they had to wait because of the other injuries that were faced. Medical staff. What I needed was trauma surgeons, okay? Penetrating injuries, loss of limbs, things like that. You saw those blunt force trauma, crush trauma, penetrating trauma. You saw it all. What I needed was trauma surgeons, and what did I have? 4 OBs. It was 5 o'clock when the tornado hit, and all the OB guys were still there delivering babies, so they came on down to help. And I walked down the hallway at one point, and a doctor reached out and stopped me and said, "Hey, can you give me some more sutures?" And I looked, and I had to do that double take, and it's one of our OB docs, and he's sewing on this guy's foot. And I just looked at him and said, "Man, it's been a long time since you've done that, you know, a long time." I could tell by the zigzag that went through that guy's foot. He was proud of it, though. So our medical staff, we had over 200 physicians that responded to us. But what am I getting at? You need to have a spot, not your ER, where your medical staff responds to. You don't want everybody responding to your ER because it's already chaotic. Have them respond somewhere. Put your chief of staff of your medical department in charge of dispersing those people. So our ER doc, when he needed a surgeon or somebody else, he would call them up and we would put them where we needed them. The only people that respond to our ER during a disaster are trauma surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, and neurosurgeons, because that's who you need taking care of those people. When you bring an OB doc in to a situation like that, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but it's been a while since they've done trauma like that, and it can cause more of an issue up front. So have them respond somewhere where they can be dispersed out as needed. As far as our nurses, we always had the question, did you have to call people in? Did you have enough? Those are the two big things that we had asked. Yes, we had enough. We had enough inside of our walls. We couldn't get anybody else inside. But when you turned around, there was somebody taking care of every single patient. Nobody went without. Everybody was being taken care of. And how many physicians do we have here? All right. On a normal daily basis, you normally don't see a physician come into the ER, take a report on a patient, put them on a heart monitor, put them on a bedpan, take them off, cover them up, call a report to the floor, and then push them upstairs. That was the biggest miracle we saw out of the whole thing. It was great, but here's what the thing was. Everybody did what they went into medicine for that night. They took care of those people in need. So it didn't matter what your specialty was. When you stopped at that patient's bedside or their chair or the floor where they were, you did everything you could for that patient, and then you moved on to the next one. And that's what was amazing. It did not matter if you were a surgeon, a nurse, an EMT, a housekeeper. You did what you could that night because everybody that was there was, number one, glad to be alive, and number two, devastated because of what had happened to their city. So did we have to call nurses in? Well, you couldn't get a phone call outside. Text messages were slim. I told you the story. I was on the phone with my wife. I did that thing that everybody does now, that whole Facebook, thing, and posted out to her that I was fine. Because the last thing she heard on TV before all those cameras went was that our hospital had been destroyed. So she's worrying. It was 45 minutes. But this became our friend, social media. Twitter, Facebook, whatever. If you can control a social media site for your employees, that helped a lot. Because if you can get in touch with one and they repost it out, you're good to go. And that's what happened. Somebody saw one of our posts. Everybody had watched the tornado on site. But it can also be your worst enemy. We have a little lake that is less than 2 feet deep, about 3 blocks from the hospital that a little community is built around. And about every 20 minutes, you would get a phone call, hey, they just drained Forest Lake and they found 38 bodies. Okay. So you'd get the first call, you think, wow, okay. Well, then fire rescue says, no, the lake's still full of water. There's a bunch of debris. We don't know what's in there. So for days, you had people calling, we just found this. We just found that. Or they would put it out on Facebook and cause mass chaos to your ER. There are those people who take advantage of those disasters. They price gouge. They decide they're going to come in and loot. Remember I told you in Alabama everybody has pickup trucks and chainsaws. We have one other thing, and we use them, guns. Our incidence of gunshot wounds in the next 5 days after, or the next 2 days after that, went up significantly. Then they stopped. And the reason they stopped is the National Guard showed up with bigger guns. But those, you loot, we shoot. We had a few of those signs, but you didn't get very much warning. But that's the truth. You have people that are going to take advantage of that. You're going to have people that take advantage of those who truly need help, and it becomes hard to help those people. Talk about supplies real quick. We ran out of all of that. Rooms, beds, bandages, and sutures. We're going to talk about sutures in just a few minutes. We didn't have enough, and you didn't have anybody that could get to you for a long time. So we have stockpiles now in our hospital in certain areas, and we also have a contract with our vendor plus our vendor's competitor. And why did we do that? Because our vendor has 2 locations, one in Louisiana and one in Georgia. And if you draw that diagonal line, it's straight across where the tornadoes go. So they couldn't get to us. So we put their competitors to the north of us. So we can call anybody and have a truckload that is ready. They have 4 separate kits that are on standby for us. If we call for kit number 1, then we know in kit number 1 it's all the kind of stuff for a tornado. Crush, injuries, bandages, stuff like that. So you have to kind of use your imagination in something like this, and that's one of the things that we've done. We got a call from EMS pretty early on that said, we are out of backboards. We can't transport these people out. Spinal cord injuries, we don't have any backboards. Remember I told you about the guy in the pickup truck? He used what he knew. He didn't have any medical knowledge, but he knew one thing, that there were backboards laying everywhere. Tables, doors, pieces of plywood, and that's what they used. We did successfully unite one gentleman with his front door at our ER. And that was the exact thing I expect to get, a laugh. But he saw that door and said, that's mine. It's 412 whatever street. And you walk up and look on the door knocker, and sure enough. But why was he so excited to see his door? That's all he had left. His house was gone. That's all he had. And then he looks at you and says, can I take my door with me? Sure, why not? I mean, there's stuff laid everywhere. We'll be glad for you to cart one thing off. So you have to use your imagination, and EMS is great at that. Most of the times they're not funded like they really should be. And I work pre-hospital EMS as a flight nurse. I've worked on the ambulance. You get out there and you have to use your imagination, and those guys did. And that's what ended up happening. The worst thing about the ER was not only the patients, but you got to have a plan for all those people that show up. And what I mean is, we're on a hill. Normally you can't see the hospital just like that. You can see it across Tuscaloosa now, doesn't matter. But it's sort of the bug theory, okay? All the lights went out in Tuscaloosa, and we're on generator power, so we have lights. And so you turn the light on outside, and all the bugs. That's what our hospital was. And everybody showed up because we had lights. We're that safe haven, and it's going to happen to you during your disaster. So we had 2,500 people that took shelter in our parking deck. We didn't know if that thing was structurally sound because we had taken a glancing blow, but they were there. You got to have a plan to manage those people. Your staff will take care of the patients that come in that are injured. You as management people better figure out how to manage the ones that aren't hurt. So the last thing I'm going to talk to you about is the same thing, and I'm not going to harp on it, but the same thing that Dr. Veer talked about was the wounds. We saw the very same thing. They saw the exact same thing in Birmingham at UAB, was the wounds. And it goes against everything that we've always been told. Leave the wounds open and irrigate them like crazy. You treat them battlefield-style medicine. Okay? Irrigate them. Don't give them antibiotics. Okay? Because the theory behind this is, you give them antibiotics, you kill off the only thing that is protecting you. The only thing. And then those fungal infections take over, and then everybody's got the peach fuzz growing on their skin, and you don't want that because you're not going to be able to keep up with that. These people are going to die. There are a lot of people that lost limbs and lost their lives from having that done. There's a couple of studies that are being done right now, one looking at our facility, one looking at Joplin and at UAB, about what to do, how to manage these. And I'm not telling you to do this, but it's something you need to think about. Joplin saw it, we've seen it, Birmingham has seen it. So it's something to definitely take a look at, because remember, these tornadoes, the first thing it hit in Tuscaloosa was a roofing factory full of shingles and nails. Then it hit a scrap yard and picked all that up after it had gone 20 miles across farmland. So imagine all that stuff in that debris ball getting thrown through you. You end up with stuff inside you that shouldn't be there. We quit looking in people's ears. You couldn't see. They were filled with dirt, mud, and debris. So we think long-term, sinus problems, bad infections of the lungs. A lot of the areas it went through were older homes, asbestos, what was in the air that these people breathed. So long-term management, but the wounds are one thing that we're looking at. So in summary, what would I tell you? Your disaster plan is for logistics. Your people know how to take care of them. You don't have to tell them what to do. Your people are going to take care of their neighbors, their community. They're going to take care of them. You've treated patients with these injuries before. The issue is going to be the vast number. That's why the logistics is the main thing. Practice until you fail and then fix it. I challenge you. We finally convinced our administration, but it took a disaster to do it. Pull your hospital from the power grid right before you go down and tell the ER docs, hey, there's 50 patients coming from a disaster. Pull your hospital from the power grid. That's going to do a lot. It's going to tell you where you don't have the critical equipment that you need, and it's going to do something to your staff. is going to make them mad because they don't have air conditioner, and that automatically raises that intensity level. It'll tell you a lot about your staff that night. I think we had 100% patient satisfaction that night. One of our local businesses, a bank, wrote a blank check to McAllister's Deli, and they unloaded food to us. We gave it to the patients because we didn't have time to stop and eat. But everybody was glad to be alive. That's the point. The whole goal in disaster management and disaster planning is to get your logistics figured out of how to manage the situation and take an organized approach to triaging the patients and to treating them and provide optimal care while you do it. Thank you very much.